what is pokayoking? Basically, it's when you manipulate your environment to try to change your behavior, and more specifically, to prevent a certain behavior. So basically, you try to foolproof certain behaviors. It's also called a forcing function. So, are you struggling with a bad habit? I suggest try pokayoking it. So first off, to help you understand what it is, here are some simple examples of pokayoking in real life. Number 1, it's called a reverse lockout feature. So there's a thing in most cars that prevents you from putting your car into reverse whenever you're flying down the freeway at 80 miles per hour. That would be horrible for your transmission, among all kinds of other things. Number 2, on older GPS systems, car manufacturers wanted to make sure that they couldn't get sued by someone claiming that they were changing where they wanted to go and then they got into an accident. Well, to prevent this, they would make sure that you couldn't change the GPS's destination while the car was moving. And lastly, microwaves. Have you ever turned on a microwave with the door open? I didn't think so. That's because the manufacturers pokayoked it. Now, you probably have a good idea of what it is. It's changing a system or an environment to literally make a certain behavior impossible. So, here's some ways that I've used this concept to help improve my own life. Number 1, a pull-up bar. To work on doing pull-ups, I actually bought a pull-up bar and placed it in the doorway to my room. Now, whenever I leave the room or come back in, I am forced to see that pull-up bar and forced to think about it. And I'm very likely to do 2 or 3 pull-ups. Doing this for a few weeks has greatly increased the amount of pull-ups that I can do in a row. I pokayoked it because I can't walk into or out of my room without seeing it. Number 2 is a blood pressure cuff. So, I have been trying to take my blood pressure every morning and every night. Now, this is a habit that I'm recently trying to start. Why? Because I did it for a little while and then I stopped doing it, and I'd really like to see some long-term data of my blood pressure. So to make it easier, every night before I go to bed, I take my blood pressure cuff, I pick it up off of my bed, and I use it to record what my blood pressure is. Then when I'm done, I take the blood pressure cuff and I put it on my journal. You might be asking, why your journal? Well, that's the first thing I look at whenever I wake up in the morning. Then the next morning, whenever I wake up, I see the blood pressure cuff, I take my blood pressure, and then I move the cuff to my bed. That way, I can't use my journal in the morning or go to bed at night without moving the cuff and checking my blood pressure. I am forcing the function of checking my blood pressure. Number 3 is getting rid of junk food. So this is pretty simple. Basically, you just take all the junk food you have and you throw it in the trash. If it's in your house, you're going to eat it. And how do I know this? Because I made some monster cookies. These cookies are amazing. If you want the recipe, just DM me on Instagram. Anyways, I made these monster cookies a little while ago to share with some of my family. I had about 2 cups of mini chocolate chips left over after I made all these cookies. Guess what happens during the next week? Every time I walked by the kitchen, I saw them, popped a handful in my mouth, and I was hardly even mindful of it. By the end of the week, they were gone. So here's a simple solution. Throw away your junk food so you don't have it. Another example is just leaving my phone at home. Sometimes whenever I travel, it's best to just leave my phone at home. It might seem a little extreme, but leaving your phone at home does many things. You become more mindful because with less distractions mean that you have to have more attention on the outside world. It also forces you to talk to more people. Want to know the best restaurant to visit? Want to know how to get there? This forces conversation. And you'd also be very surprised at how much your eye contact and body language reading skills improve whenever there's no phone to hide behind. And lastly, I have created an alarm on my phone that reminds me once a week to do something called a finance check. Now, I used to do these daily, but I don't really have enough action in my bank accounts to justify the time spent doing it daily, so I do it weekly. And basically what I do is I log into all of my bank accounts, all of my credit cards, and I recalculate the taxes that I owe for that month. And then I add up all the cash that I have, subtract all the credit cards and taxes that I owe, and I'm left with a single number that I use as my liquid cash number. Basically, I don't let this number go below 0. So anyways, right now I have 8 credit cards, and this process forces me to check them every week. And using this method, I have never paid any late fees, I've never paid any interest, and I've never spent more money on a credit card than I couldn't pay with cash in the bank. If you're wondering, why do you have 8 credit cards? That's crazy. Well, I currently have earned around $630 from cashback rewards and $550 from sign-up bonuses this year alone. And my credit score is around 760 at the moment. So this alarm forces me to spend 10 minutes a week logging into every account and then physically writing my numbers down. This, in turn, gives me a really good idea of my current financial situation. If the number is more than $10,000 of liquid cash, I invest some of it. And if it's less than $2,000, I try to stop spending. And so far, this system has been working really well for me. Also, most of these credit cards are set up for autopay and really cheap monthly services like Netflix or Spotify that I use anyways, so even if I don't log in, they would still get paid. However, if I had to rely on motivation to log in and check them, I probably would miss a payment because I'd forget it. And if I had to rely on discipline to log in and check them, I might miss a payment also. However, this alarm that I set up reminds me every week instead of relying on my memory, my motivation, or my discipline. So as we move further into this video, I want to introduce you to a life-changing idea. This idea is that there are 3 ways to go about achieving a goal that you have, specifically with your behavior change. Each step up changes you as a person and exponentially increases the likelihood of you achieving your goals. I mean, once you master the last step, your goals start to become limited by time and your imagination, not by your energy or money or procrastination or effort, which is probably holding most of you back. So let's move on. The first one is motivation. Motivation is the feeling of encouragement that your brain gives you whenever you start the process of dreaming big. We all know what motivation feels like. It's when you make it to the gym for the first time, or you cook your first healthy meal, or you check your stocks the day after that you invested them and they went up. The fuel that started those behaviors is called motivation. However, as we also all know, motivation fades. As time goes on, you'll find excuses not to go to the gym, or maybe that eating healthier is too expensive for you right now, or that you can spend your money on better things than investing. Motivation fades because our brain likes new things. We fall apart if we rely on motivation alone. So what is number 2? So the next step is discipline. Discipline is the skill of doing things that you don't want to do because you know the long-term outcome of those is worth the short-term choice. So discipline is the skill and the mindset of doing something even when you don't want to. For example, a week into your new workout routine, your body is sore and it's tired and it doesn't want to keep going to the gym. However, because you are a human being, you have the amazing ability to go, yeah, it sucks now, but the payoff in the future is definitely worth it. So you can continue to do that behavior without short-term motivation, and you see it as an investment. Discipline, however, relies on willpower. And as you know, cognitive psychologists have found that willpower is like a battery. As your day goes on, your willpower will start to drain. It'll get lower and lower. This means that you should do your most important behaviors in the morning, because you'll be able to fight those behaviors with your extra willpower. However, as the day goes on, your willpower will start to deplete. You'll have less and less of it. If someone asks you if you want a cookie every hour, you might have built up your willpower battery to have the discipline to say no to the first person, then no to the second person, and then no to the third person. But eventually, you'll cave on the 8th person and you'll take the cookie. So now we know we fall apart if we rely on motivation. And we also break down if we rely on discipline. So what's the solution to sticking to a new behavior? Whether it's a habit or a new routine or some new goal that you're reaching for? Well, the answer is number 3, which is your environment. Mastering your environment is the mindset of putting yourself in your environment where success comes easy. So let me continue with the cookie analogy. Mastering your environment would simply be getting rid of everyone in your life who asks you if you want a cookie. You're literally changing the inputs of your life instead of trying to fight them. So according to cognitive psychology again, you as a person, all you are is an information processor, kind of like a computer. You have inputs like your ears, your eyes, your nose. And you have outputs, like you can do things with your hands, and you can say things with your mouth. Now, cognitive psychologists say what happens in between these two things is called a mediational process, also known as thinking or automatic brain processes. So, whenever you rely on motivation, you're going to fall apart because you're relying on your brain to keep wanting to do something. However, the flaw here is that your brain likes novel things. It likes new things to keep growing. But, as you know, most habits are the same thing over and over again, so it won't have that motivation for long. This is why we fall apart when you rely on motivation. However, when it comes to discipline, your brain can actually see the end goal of what it wants, whether that's a six-pack or $100,000 profits, or to know something from a book. But, after time, your brain gets tired, and it loses the ability to choose, and so it falls back on those automatic processes. Well, what's automatic for the brain, you say? Well, it's definitely not reading a book, it's not doing crunches, and it's not finding which stock to put your hard-earned money in. It's laying down and watching Netflix. This is why you break down when you rely on discipline. So, when it comes to changing your environment, you are literally changing the input of what is going into your brain. This means your brain doesn't have to make any extra effort to make a good decision. When you get rid of the person asking you if you want a cookie, your brain never has to make the decision to take it or not, thus getting you one step closer to your goal. So, back to our examples. When it comes to me checking my blood pressure, I literally cannot go to sleep at night or work in the morning without visually seeing and physically moving that blood pressure cuff. Now, I could just move it, but I'm forcing myself to look at it and then move it, which reminds me to use it. And the issue beforehand wasn't that I didn't want to, it was simply that I forgot to. I just needed a reminder. So I changed my environment to remind me. And even better than this is to change your environment to prevent you from doing something. For example, if you want to eat healthier, the trick is to throw away all of your junk food. This way, if you want to eat junk food, you have to get in your car, you got to drive to the grocery store, buy the junk food, and then eat it. That's way more difficult than just going to the kitchen and eating an apple. So here's one more example of me changing my environment to help make my decisions easier. And this one involves waking up, which a lot of people struggle with. So as you know, I love coffee. Like, just the smell of coffee can get me up out of my bed. However, I have to get out of bed to make the coffee first. Or so I thought. Did you know that you can buy an automatic coffee maker that makes coffee for you automatically in the morning without you having to do anything? All you have to do is set them up the night before. So what do? I buy this automatic coffee machine, I set it up every night to go off at 5 a.m. and I put it right next to my bed. That way I can wake up to the beautiful sounds of hissing steam and dripping magic, and the gorgeous smell of freshly brewed coffee. Now it sounds dumb, but it has radically changed my morning. I wake up and I type an easy 1,000 words while sipping that morning cup. I simply just changed my environment in a way to positively change my behavior. So as I end this video, I want to ask, what have you pokayoked? What are you going to pokayoke now that you've seen this video? And please remember these two things. We fall apart if we rely on motivation, and we break down if we rely on discipline. Instead, make your environment help you. Thank you.